to Friday. Friday before our only break of the semester. I'm gonna start by returning some homework from the workbook, as is my usual custom, and then we will take a look at the assignment that you have for today. So. All right, since, as you know, we are taking a quiz later this class, I'm not going to collect the homework, but we are going to go over the answers to see if we're on the right track. So we'll start there. My assignment may look a tad bit, just slightly different from yours, because mine is much older. But it has the same questions and it has the same answers on it as your worksheet does. There you go. You do not have to have stems on your notes or the scales like I do. Like I said, mine was from many years ago. So, in section 1, or the first section of your homework, an A flat, you're given an A flat major scale. No, you're not even given that. I just asked you to spell a minor scale, right? So forget that. Let's just look at the minor scale. A flat natural minor, correct? Should have a flat on every note, because the key signature for A flat minor is 7 flats, and we know that the key signature adheres exactly to the natural minor scale. So since it's asking for an A flat natural minor scale, we follow the key signature exactly. The next scale I asked you to spell was a B harmonic minor scale, and we should know from B minor's key signature that there are 2 sharps, F sharp and C sharp. That would give us the natural minor scale. And then what do we do to a natural minor scale to obtain the harmonic minor?
Raise the 7.
Raise the 7. So that's why I have F sharp and C sharp, but I also had to raise the 7th scale to read the A. So you should have a grand total of C sharp, F sharp, and A sharp in that scale for B harmonic minor. The last one I asked you to spell was F sharp melodic minor. I'll have to go down a little bit first. F sharp natural minor has 3 sharps in it. F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. But to go from natural minor to spell an ascending melodic minor scale, I need to raise scale degrees 6 and 7 a half step. So I've explained why I got the F sharp, the G sharp, and the C sharp. Raising scale degrees 6 and 7 tells me why I have to have D sharp and E sharp on the way up at the end of towards the end of that scale. Then on the way down, scale degree 6 and 7 must always be a half step lower than they are on the way up. So that's why I have E natural and D natural on the way down. But I retain the C sharp, the F sharp, and the G sharp that I had in the first 5 notes of the scale, because those 5 notes never change in any of the minor scales. And so this is my total. Remember, melodic minor scales need to be spelled going up and down since they are slightly different from each other. And the descending version or form of the melodic minor scale should be identical to the natural minor. So the accidentals in the descending half over here, they should follow the key signature for F sharp minor exactly. And they do. 3 sharps. F sharp, C sharp, D sharp on the way down. That's all I've got. Make sense? All right, let's take a look at your short answer. I think I was asking you to fill in the blank with some relative keys. B minor, number 1, is the relative minor of D major. Remember, relative keys share the same key signature. They have exactly the same key signature. Number 2, the relative minor of E major should be C sharp minor. They both have 4 sharps. E flat minor is the relative minor of G flat major. Who knows the key signature for G flat major slash E minor? Not G flat major.
Oh,
That's G
G
major.
major.
Yeah. 6 flats, that's right, 6 flats. G flat major. Number 4, the relative minor of F sharp major is D sharp minor. What's the key signature of those 2 keys?
That's 6 sharps.
6 sharps, good. And finally, C minor is the relative minor of E flat major. What's the key signature for that?
3 flats.
3 flats, that's right. Okay, good. What was the key signature for E major and C sharp minor?
E major is that 4 sharps.
4 sharps, yep. So that makes C sharp minor 4 sharps, yep. And then what is the key signature for B minor and D major? 2 sharps, good. That's right. Before we get to the circle of fifths, I think you had these 6 problems. Identifying those minor key signatures, the first 4, you should have G sharp minor, F minor, C sharp minor, and A sharp minor, based on the number of flats and sharps. And then number 5, that is the key signature for B flat minor in the bass clef, should have 5 flats. And number 6, E flat minor in the treble clef, it has 6 flats. Well, that's weird. I didn't intend to do that. Number 5 has 5 flats, and number 6 has 6 flats. I did not intend to do that. Huh. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, all we got left is the circle of fifths. And I better shrink this just a little more. That's as far down as, anyway, so hopefully you can see all you need to see is the inside of the minor keys. Remember, A minor is the one with no flats, no sharps at the top. That's its pair with C major. And you can check all the rest of mine. For these enharmonic keys down here, these 3 pair, it doesn't matter if you have B flat and A sharp flip-flop, or E flat and D sharp flip-flop, or A flat and D sharp flip-flop. It doesn't matter. Now, would it be nice to take our quiz with that on the screen? Would be Yes, sir.
Why do you put a line over the C?
Yeah, because, when we write, major keys, we should use uppercase letters, and minor keys, lowercase letters. And C is really one of those letters where if you don't have a reference point, like, is that lowercase or capital? So, the line over a letter means definitely that you mean lowercase.
Okay.
That's intentionally, that's clear to me. Sometimes F's can be a little that way, like if you're not careful, you can just do that. Is that capital F or lowercase f? Well, if I have nothing else to compare it to, this, if you intend lowercase, that would make it ultra clear to me. Good. Other questions? All right, are we ready to do this half sheet quiz? Did anyone go see Micah last hour? Hey, good for you. So all you need is a pencil. And once you get the quiz, you can obviously start. Do the best you can. That's all you can ask for. As I say in the instructions, watch out for clef changes. So just be careful about that. let's take about 1 more minute on this, please. Very well, let me come around and collect them. Well, at least that's out of the way now, right? Now you can have a great, fantastic weekend. What I'd like to discuss for the rest of the class is, as I mentioned maybe previously, I'd like to start talking about rhythm and meter. We have taken about 3 weeks to talk about just the basics and fundamentals of pitch. So now it's time that we actually talk about the time aspect of music. And that's what rhythm is. Rhythm is a broad term that refers to the time aspect of music as opposed to the pitch aspect of music. Okay? Now rhythm is notated in music using something called duration symbols. So I will use these terms probably interchangeably. Duration, or sometimes I use the term rhythmic value. In my book and in my terminology, those mean the same thing. Durations and or rhythmic values. What does that refer to? Well, it refers to things like quarter notes and half notes and eighth notes and whole notes and 16th notes and anything else that you may have. Okay? So that's what I mean by durations and rhythmic values. Now, durations are organized in music. They're designed so that each symbol is twice the duration of the next shorter symbol, and at the same time, each duration symbol is half the duration of the next longer symbol. Since I took a little bit too much space over here, let's start with a whole note, for instance. A whole note is twice as long in duration as what note value?
Half note.
The half note, right? And the half note is twice as long as what duration?
Quarter note.
The quarter note. And the quarter note is twice as long as
An eighth note.
an eighth note. And an eighth note is twice as long as a 16th note, and so on and so forth, yeah. By themselves, eighth notes have what we call a flag. 16th notes have 2 flags. I guess I didn't really write that clearly. Quarter notes, half notes, and whole notes have no flags. Whole notes have no stems. So we can see, for instance, that the quarter note is not only twice as long as the eighth note, but at the same time it is half as long as a half note. Okay, so things go in multiples of 2. Does anyone know there is a note duration that is twice as long as a whole note? Does anyone know what that is?
Isn't it a double whole note or something like that?
Well, it's the same length as a double whole note, yeah. Technically,
Is it a dollar note?
no, it's actually a note that looks like this. It's got vertical lines on both sides of it. It's kind of like a rectangular shape. And this is called, it's spelled, it looks like it's pronounced breed, but it's actually pronounced a bread.
Huh.
So the brev is twice as long as the whole note. And we won't see a whole lot of brevs in your musical education here, but we will from time to time. In fact, somewhere, I don't know when we get to see our first one in our sight singing book, but those of you that are taking oral skills, sometimes we see brevs in the sight singing book. And that's equivalent to the length of 2 whole notes. What happens if we want to get durations other than these? Like durations that fall into cracks, that are longer than an eighth note but shorter than a quarter note, things like that.
This is like where you put the dot.
Yeah, that's when you have to use dotted note values, and sometimes we even use tied notes to get notes of different length that kind of fall in between the lengths of these notes here. Now a tie, just so you know, a tie is a curved line that connects notes of the same pitch. And that's what a tie looks like, that curved line there. Ties must connect notes of the same pitch. And what a tie does is it is equivalent of adding both of these note durations together. Okay? So 2 tied quarter notes is the same thing as, and the same sound as a half note. Okay? It's a curved line that connects 2 notes of the same pitch, creating a new duration that is equal to their sum. So because 2 quarter notes added together equal the same length as a half note, then 2 quarter notes tied together would sound just like it. Because when we tie a note, we do not articulate the second of the tie notes. We just kind of add that whole duration together and blend it all together into one sound, and so it sounds just like a half note. We don't re-articulate the sound of the second note that's tied. Okay. Now, what does a dot following a note do? We're following a symbol. It adds to the duration half the value of the symbol that precedes it. So for example, if I have a dotted quarter note, then what that is equal to, it's equal to the length of the quarter note plus the dot adds on half of a quarter note. What's half of a quarter note? An eighth note. So the sound of a dotted quarter note is going to be equivalent in sound to a quarter plus an eighth, or a quarter tied to an eighth. These will equal the same length or duration. What happens though if we have something like this? And these are possible in music. Have you ever seen a double dotted note? Well, let's see if we can quickly figure that out. Let's do the math. Now, some of you are thinking, I was told there would be no math. So let's do the math anyways. Okay, so we take the quarter note. The first dot adds a what to it? An eighth note. Good. And the second dot is going to add half of whatever the first dot added. So what's half of an eighth note?
16.
A 16th note. So that's going to tack on a 16th note. And this is equivalent in length or duration to all of this tied together. Now, rhythm in general is organized into pulses that are grouped into recurring patterns of strong and weak. So here's another set of terms which I'll try to make clear to you over here. When I talk about pulses in music, or pulses in rhythm, basically the term pulse is another word for a beat. It's synonymous with the term beat. So a pulse or a beat, in my book, they mean the same thing. And what I'm saying is that rhythm is organized in general in, there are generally two kinds of pulses or beats. One is strong, one is considered weak. Now there may be some gradations in between there, but for now let's just deal with two kinds of beats or pulses in music. There's strong and then there's weak ones. That kind of simplifies things. Now, so I said the pulses are called beats, and when you have a complete pattern of strong and weak beats, that is called a measure. Measure. Let me put a diagram up. Yeah, let me put it above this tab here. For instance, let's say you have a pattern of strong and weak beats that only contains 2 beats total. That's a complete pattern. Strong first and then weak second. Each of these are considered to be beats. And if this is your complete pattern, and that's as long as your pattern is, then we can say that this complete pattern is known as this one right here is called a measure. And what are the ends of measures marked with in music? You know what's it called? A bar line, that's right. And that's what this is. Just a vertical line. That shows you when you've reached the end of a measure. When you've reached the end of a complete pattern of strong and weak beats. Okay? Now, if we continue this pattern and have this pattern recur over and over and over again, then all that put together is what we call meter in music. Meter is the recurring pattern of strong and weak beats, or recurring measures. So for instance, I can have another complete pattern, strong, weak, and that's a measure. And then I can keep on going, strong, weak, and that's a measure, and so on and so forth. But then all this taken together, that's what we refer to as meter in music. The recurring pattern of strong and weak beats. Okay. So, what I have over here on the board is kind of like a crude diagram, but it gets the point across. Normally in music we have complete patterns or measures that divide into this number of beats. 2 beats here, you see 1 beat is strong, 1 beat is weak. 3 beats, strong, weak, weak, and then 4 beats. And here the pattern is strong, weak, a little less strong than the first one, and then weak again. So, our patterns of strong and weak pulses or beats that recur over and over again generally group or divide into these 3 kinds. When we have a strong weak pattern, we say the measure has 2 beats. Right? And I could even number them here. There's the first beat, there's the second beat. It's usually either strong or weak. And when a measure has 2 beats, we say that the meter type is duple. That's a really important point. And I don't know if its importance will really hit you until, after Labor Day and after we talk about this rhythm stuff, this meter stuff a little more. But when a measure has 2 beats in it, it's called duple meter. When there are 3 beats in a measure, we say that the meter type is, we describe the meter as being triple meter. Triple meter. And when there are 4 beats in a measure, such as this, 1, 2, 3, 4, a 4-beat measure, we say that the meter type is quadruple meter. Quadruple meter. Okay? Those are important terms. Duple, triple, and quadruple. So, let me state this again because it's of major importance. The number of beats that a measure divides into is referred to as meter type. In other words, meter type tells us how the measure divides. Does it divide into 2 beats, 3 beats, or 4 beats? That's what I mean by meter type. meter type. Okay, I've got a handout that I want to give you at this stage, which will help, hopefully help aid in your understanding of the different levels or the hierarchy that we find in meter. Oops. By the way, another way to familiarize yourself, or another comparison of what I mean by beat. Beat is usually the pulse that you tap your foot to when you hear a song. That's usually what the beat is. So for instance, if I hummed the tune Silent Night, I could go. How many beats are in the measure?
3.
Yeah, you see that? 1, 2, 3, 1. And that would be an example of triple meter. All right, so now that you have this handout, could you look at the top, basically the top row? You see how I've got, meter, all as the general term for everything on this chart. The top row says meter type. What does meter type refer to? The number of beats in a measure. We have duple as a possibility, 2 beats in a measure. Triple, 3 beats in a measure. Quadruple, 4 beats in a measure. All right, now, in most music, however, we hear durations that are shorter than or quicker than the beat, don't we? Okay. We call those shorter durations divisions of the beat. I think I've got a marker open here. Those shorter, quicker durations are called divisions of the beat. And basically what divisions of the beat refer to is how does each of the beats in a measure further divide into smaller parts or shorter parts. That's what we're talking about. So I kind of have it on a separate, a lower row in my meter chart. It's kind of like a different level in the hierarchy of rhythm or meter. Beats really only can divide in 2 ways. They can divide either into 2 smaller parts, or they can divide into 3 smaller but equal parts. That's how it works in music. The beat does not really divide into any other number of equal parts. If it does more, like 4 or 6 or whatever like that, then that's even further subdivisions of the beat, or of the division of the beat, which are not on this chart. So, remember this, the beat only divides into 2 smaller but equal parts, or into 3 smaller but equal parts. If the beat divides into 2 smaller but equal parts, the type of beat division is called simple division. Simple division means the beat divides into 2 smaller parts. Okay, 2 smaller but equal parts. When a beat divides into 3 smaller but equal parts, we say that the beat type or the division type is compound. Compound. These are super duper important words. Okay? 3 smaller parts. So the terms simple and compound really refer to a lower level of the hierarchy. In other words, into how many smaller parts does each beat split into. Now, the number of divisions a beat divides into is called beat type. And that's why it's over there on the left. It's just as important as the term meter type. Meter type tells us into how many smaller parts a whole measure divides into. Beat type tells us into how many parts a single beat divides into. Does the beat divide into two smaller parts like this? Or does the beat divide into three smaller but equal parts like this? When we talk about splitting the beat up into smaller parts, that is beat type. So a little different level or lower level than of the metric hierarchy than the meter type is. Okay? So it's extremely important not to confuse beat type, which refers to how the beat divides, with meter type, and that refers to how the measure divides. You got the difference? There's a big distinction there. Now, meter types and beat types can be combined together in 6 possible ways. And that's what the bottom row, so to speak, on this chart tells you. Well, no, don't even go to the bottom row. Scratch that. Let's just look at the possible types this way. You can have duple meter, and each beat can divide into 2 parts. Or you can have 2 beats in a measure, and each of those beats divide into 3 parts, right? And the same is true for triple meter. Each beat could divide into 2 equal parts, or divide into smaller 3 equal parts. And the same is quadruple meter. So do you see how we get 6 possibilities here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 3 meter types, and in each meter type, the beat can divide into 2 different smaller ways. Either 2 parts, smaller parts, or 3 smaller parts. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, what we want to be able to do is, with this information, we want to be able to look at some music, the notation of the rhythm of the music, and we want to be able to identify how many beats are in a measure, but we also want to be able to identify how does the beat divide. Does it divide simply, or does it divide in a compound way? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be figuring that out, and then we're going to describe the meter like this. For instance, we could have triple meter type, but simple division type, or beat type, and we would call that meter triple simple. Or we might have quadruple meter type, and we might have compound division, or beat type, and then we would describe the meter as quadruple compound. So we've got a term for the meter type, how the measure divides, and then we have a term for how the beat divides into smaller parts yet. All right, so now on the back of your handout, let's look at some examples just in the left column there. Whoa. Sorry about that. Let's look at the top example in the left column. You've got 2 measures of some rhythm notated there. And to visually determine the meter and beat types of a passage, what we do is we typically look at and rely on the notation of the rhythm. The rhythm's notation. Here's a very important principle when you're looking at notation and trying to determine meter and beat type. All notes that are connected by a beam belong to one and the same beat. Let me say that again. All notes that are connected by a beam belong to one and the same beat. So, and then let me get you the other important principle here. Each beat in a measure must be the same length. You can't have beats of different lengths all within the same measure. And if each beat in the measure must be the same length, then each division of the beat must also be of the same length too. Those are your 2 rules or principles. Now, see if we can apply this. Okay. Let's look at any one of the measures of this top one here. In fact, Do you see how this first beat here, there's some 16ths and 8ths that are joined together by a beam? Well, that's not going to be super duper helpful for us because we want to find divisions and beats that are of the same length. And those are different rhythmic values. So that's not the clearest, not the best place to look. But let's look at the next beat. You remember how I said all notes that are beamed together belong to one and the same beat? So I can see that these three notes beamed together are a beat. And I can see that these three notes together are a beat. Well, if these three notes together are all on one beat, then one note duration would be the same length or time span as 3/8 notes. Does anyone know?
A dotted quarter note?
A dotted quarter, yeah. 3/8 add up to or equal the same length as a dotted quarter. So if I ask you, what is the note duration of the beat? In this example, you would say it is the dotted quarter. That's how long that's a duration the beat is. Okay, so, and I know that because these three notes belong to one and the same beat. Now, how many beats are in a measure? How many dotted quarter notes, so to speak, would fit in a full measure? Well, let's look at this measure here. 1 would be there, 2 would be there, 3 would be there, and this rest is a dotted rest, quarter rest. It's the same thing as a dotted quarter note. So how many beats fit in a measure? 4. What's the meter type? Quadruple meter. That's right. I'm going to put that, you can write that down on your paper. So we've figured out into how many equal parts the measure divides. It divides into 4 equal parts, so it's quadruple meter. Now, let's look at one of these beats. How does the beat itself further divide? Does it divide into 2 equal parts or 3? How many of those smaller eighth notes are beamed together at a time? 3. So what is the beat type? Is it simple or compound? Compound. And that's my final answer. I say that the meter, I would describe this example as being in quadruple compound. Quadruple compound meter. You see how I got that? But you have to rely on the notation to get a lot of this information. We got time for this one more. Let's skip the next one. Let's go to this one right here. Remember, any notes that are connected by a beam belong to one beat only. One and the same beat. So maybe the first measure here isn't the clearest to figure out what the meter type is. And maybe this measure here with the 16th note, maybe that's not the clearest either. But what if I look at the second measure here? No, the third measure I saw, right here. Can anyone tell me by looking at the third measure how many big beats the measure is divided into? Yeah, that's right, 3. What is the duration or rhythmic value of one full beat? The quarter note, yeah. Do you see how that works out? There's a beat, a quarter note. These two are beamed together. 2 eighth notes added up together equal a quarters, and then we know that they're on one and the same beat because they're beamed together. And the same is true of beats. So you can see that there are 3 beats in that measure. So what is our meter type? Triple? And let's take the same measure. Let's look at one of these beats. Again, the ones with the dots, they're not as clear. So I probably wouldn't use that as an example, but look at one of these beat groups right here. Into how many smaller divisions is the beat divided into? Is it 2 or 3 that are beamed together? It's 2. So what is the beat type? Simple or compound? Simple. So I would say overall that this is triple, simple. Whoops, I'm writing down the wrong one. Sorry about that. Triple, simple. And that's my final answer. So, in order to do the homework assignment for when you come back after Labor Day, you need to understand meter type, how the measure divides into 2, 3, or 4 beats, simple, triple, quadruple. And you need to understand that the beat itself can be divided into smaller parts 2 ways. Either a simple division or compound division. And then you just look at the notation especially beaming and things like that, to find out how many beats the measure divides into, and into how many smaller parts each beat splits into. So you got your two levels of hierarchy. Your meter type, which is how the measure divides, and your beat type, which is how each beat splits. Does that make sense? All right, so before, as we go here, let me get you your handout. This is for, I guess it's Wednesday after we get back. And all I'm giving you is I'm giving you 6 musical examples, and I'm asking you to identify the meter and the beat type of those. And that's it. Okay? Okay. And when you get this, you're welcome to leave. And I hope you have a good break. Okay.